Today I sit down with Republican Jaymie Scott and Democrat Alex Long. I wanted to construct a conversation where a conservative and liberal individual sit down and have an open discussion about various hot topics. This was not constructed with the goal of getting heated or bashing one another, but rather to display that Americans with differing viewpoints can come together and have a constructive conversation. Some of the topics we discussed are abortion, climate change, affirmative action, equal opportunity, and the future of America. A lot of controversial topics as of late. I mean, even when Trump was elected, there was some controversy, but I feel like it didn't get real riled up until the past, like 2 years.
Yeah.
Early on, I was like, oh,
yeah,
it seems fine.
The atmosphere changed.
The TV show guy is now our president. Like, what do you do? It's fine. And then, God, towards the back end, it's been crazy. I still don't know how we were left with those two choices. I asked myself that.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about Trump and Hillary?
Yeah. Trump, Hillary, and Trump and Biden.
Both times.
Yeah.
Out of all the people in our country, amazing people, I imagine even you guys have met people that might be more competent or, in your opinion, maybe just more able to do the job.
I feel like I'm more able to do the job.
Yeah, and then we
Joe
get
Biden.
them, and it's a little disheartening. It's kind of like, whoa, aren't we the greatest nation on earth? What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
So I think how Trump won was and there's so many conspiracy theories and whatever, but I think mainly it was when he started talking about, in the primaries, when he started talking about America First policies. I think that kind of got people's attention, like, oh, like, this is different, like, keep talking kind of thing. Whereas the other candidates were, typical Republicans talking their typical Republican game. That's what I think.
Yeah, he had his own unique selling point, his selling proposition, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
Like he I think he tapped into that nationalism that we hadn't seen since like almost post-war time or like during the wartime, which was like, he
drain the swamp.
Yeah,
drain the swamp type deal. And I think
positioned himself that way as like an outsider, and that was really smart to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of his policy and the idea of draining the swamp. No one likes corruption in an organization, in a private company, especially not in government. Yeah. No one likes the idea of corruption. So he presents this idea that America first, I'm going to drain the swamp, anti-corruption, blah, blah, blah. That's a very tasteful idea. I can get behind that idea. I think once anyone gets inside, there's strings that are pulled and you realize, like, whoa, it's not as simple as a top-down organization where you can really just put forth your policy and ideology and have it go that way. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, that's the beauty of our system too. And the balance is you can't do that. You got 4-year terms. So even if it's bad, you're not going to be there for that long. And while you're there, it is difficult to get things done. And in comparing that to like China, for example, with COVID, there are benefits of a crazy tyrant system like that because you put top-down orders, which sometimes maybe can be like correct in containing a pathogen, let's say, but you also have the ability to go lock people in their homes to stop the pathogen. Like, that shit's crazy. Americans will never, nor should we ever, be able to wrap our head around that idea, because that's not what America is about. It's we can agree to disagree, and there's going to be different ways of solving problems and opinions with so many different types of people. But let's jump in there, because I've been trying to produce this conversation now for months. Jaymie, you've been the conservative representative for a long time now, and I appreciate it. You've always been down. And finally, I was able to get Alex here to join us as the more left liberal representative, even though I hate categorizing like left, right, conservative, liberal. For the point of this episode is just really to lay out different hot topics on the table. And instead of, we're so used to seeing like different clips on social media or different poster board like stories that you've got 6 bullet points describing something that should be talked about open dialogue and maybe granted 45 minutes just to talking about that subject, but instead condensed information and we're left to consume it like that. So I'm really, really appreciative that you guys were down to come on and have this conversation. So initially, I just want you guys to like introduce yourself real quick and then like whether you're going to school or what you do for work.
Did it start yet?
Yeah. No, we're just flowing. We're going for it.
Wait, so like you don't do like, okay, we're starting to record this?
No, we're flowing, Jaymie. That's the whole point of this.
How this works. Okay.
We're flowing.
Okay. I mean, I like that. What was the question?
So just introduce yourself real quick and then what you're what you're going to school for.
Okay.
And doing for work.
Cool. I don't know if I want to say where I work.
Oh yeah, you don't have to if you don't want.
Yeah, I don't know how they would feel about that. I'm just an intern right now, and I'm just trying to leave a good impression, get my foot in the door, and hopefully either stay there after I graduate or move on to something bigger and better. We'll see. So yeah, I have an internship. I'm a comm PR major at Cal State Fullerton. I'm almost done, so I'll be graduating December. I think technically January is when I get my certificate. But I've been doing that for forever, it seems like, because I had a baby, and going to school with a baby is just not easy, man. So
kudos to you. That I imagine there's
it's
a big
tough.
time difference there between someone having a child that young and trying to go to school.
Yeah,
other
but
priorities.
also I like screwed around for a few years after high school because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I don't know what I was doing. I took a couple gap years, as they call them.
I took one gap year, so
That's
I'm
good.
right there with you.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that's an argument I've talked about is the idea of getting spit out at 18, and let's say you're going directly to a 4-year, and you've got $100,000 in debt, and you don't even know if that's what you really want to do. You're still a child at that point. I was still a child. I mean, I don't know if that you need to either extend high school longer or you advocate for junior college to kind of give you that little leeway of deciding before you go to a 4-year, but there's an argument to be made for that. So
when I
you weren't
went to
just the
junior
one
college,
fucking around
I
after
know.
high school.
Okay, cool. So I can curse. You can edit it out, I
There's
guess.
a precedent.
No, we're on the internet. You can curse all you want.
Okay, cool. Because that's just how I naturally talk. I actually went to junior college, SEC, and I was like failing all these classes because I wasn't interested in them, and I was just irresponsible. I was 18, 19. So took a few years off, like a couple years off, and then I went back to SEC, finished my gen ed, and now I'm at Cal State Fullerton. I'm almost done, home stretch. And I also, in addition to my internship and my toddler, who is a full-time job, he's 2 now, I work at my CrossFit gym too.
Nice.
That one I'll tell you where I work because they don't care. It's quite nice.
Right.
But yeah.
Legit. And then Alex?
Yeah, so I graduated Fullerton also in 2019 with a comm advertising degree, so pretty similar. I'm currently a freelance marketing consultant, so I just kind of I have a few clients mainly in the real estate realm, and I kind of just help them with like social media mainly right now because I'm without a video crew. But once I obtain one, I'm gonna get back into the like videography type of stuff. So.
Awesome. Is that like a COVID logistical challenge, or is it just you don't have the team, you can't source them?
It was an issue of me being with a startup last year that went under, but I took all the clients with me. So it was kind of a seamless transition into me just like doing all the work myself because it was like a 3-man team and I was doing all the work anyways, and it ended up not working out. So I made it work, I guess you could say.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, like you, I also graduated from Cal State Fullerton in 18 under comm with emphasis in advertising. So, all right, you guys. So we have been living through very like tumultuous times the past 2 years politically. And Alex, you bring up that you're like a social media rep for a lot of your clients, and just that realm of us being on social media. I've taken note, which is why I did some outreach to you guys, that Jaymie, you are very outspoken in the conservative realm, and then I've seen you, Alex, post content that would be deemed liberal, and communicating strong messages at points that, I see people jump in the comments and people are feuding. And Jaymie, I imagine you probably get DMs left and right about people like combating your content. And I took note of it, which is why I wanted you guys here. But
yeah,
to start there, is there anything you guys can like point out about your own party that you like don't like? Like, Jaymie, we could start with you. Just like you wish that it wasn't there, or they weren't communicating or acting a certain way because you feel like it gives you a bad rep, or it's just not productive in solving some of these problems.
Not something as vague as that necessarily, but I'm just a huge political critic. It's a hobby I picked up. But some of the things they do are just like, Republicans, are just like, what are you doing? Like, I think it was Rick Scott, the Republican senator, just introduced new legislation to repeal the estate tax. It's like a renewed attempt to repeal the estate tax, which is the billionaires of our country basically paying way less taxes. And he did this as the Democrats were passing their $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. Like, millions of Americans are still unemployed. We have a border crisis. We have all these issues in our country. And that's what some Republicans, I should say, are concerned about. Like, those are the kind of things that are just like, what are you doing? So it's just little things, a culmination of a bunch of little things that they do, just adding up. So I definitely have a lot more critiques for the Democrat side, but it is politics. They should all be criticized.
For sure.
Yeah, I like that. I like that position for sure. I call them bleeding heart liberals, the ones that are in Congress, because, they have all these things to say, but they seldom like really, carry through with what they say. And a lot of the times they have these like illusions of grandeur almost, of like, oh, we're going to help the minority groups, like the oppressed groups, like we're going to do this and this and that. Like, here you go. It's like, it's almost like pandering or like condescending in itself to be like treating these groups like that, And it's like, you recognize they'll have a problem and like they're facing shortcomings, but just the way that I think that congressional liberals or like people like AOC go about like communicating how they want to help people is almost a little demeaning to the people themselves, if that follows,
Like, they need government to wipe their own ass, otherwise they're not going to be saved.
I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, like they need the government intervention to like show them how to live right. Like, oh, you can't budget. Like, we'll show you how to budget. Like, shit like that, Like, that I don't buy into that whole part.
And I agree 100 or mostly, but let's say for like budgeting and stuff, if someone's not competent in like finance or credit, or like maybe there are different programs that we should build to help people that aren't competent in some of those areas. But my major problem is when politicians left and right are pitching these tasteful words. Like, it sounds pretty, like it's going to get me reelected. But when you come down to the nitty gritty, they have a budget, and I want to see a plan in how you're allocating these funds and how you're truly solving these problems. Like, I always try to put it through the vision of, if like in the private industry, if you're running a company or any issue that you're trying to solve, it's very simple. Like, you can't expect the people to trust you or the people in your company to trust you if you put forth messaging and you don't follow up with it, for one, and for two, you don't show a structure in problem solving that is actually like gives us the possibility of having it work. It's just these fluffy words that I see on the surface, and I don't see things getting backed up. So even with Trump, when he got elected, and with Biden, when you look into some of those initial phrasing, like the phrases and whatnot, it wasn't always backed up, especially with Biden right now. I saw there's some controversy with, he wasn't going to be raising the taxes for individuals that make over like 400,000.
400, yeah.
And there's something now where people are like deeming it as, you kind of betrayed us a little bit because you're not sticking to with like what you exactly said, how you're going to be treating that tax policy. But nonetheless, just looking at that overarching umbrella of the nature of politicians, if you're going to tell us something and try to get something done to the best of your ability with taxpayers' budget, please do your job as well as you can in solving these issues for us. Otherwise, we're left just not understanding. They should be able to communicate like, okay, this is how we're going to try. It might not work, but we're going to do our best job to solve the homeless crisis, or make people financially literate in certain areas when people are talking about certain low-income areas that need better education and have these structural like foundations that aren't there, like a more affluent area, for example. Then, okay, as a taxpayer, I am on board with the idea of contributing towards a program that's going to make the country a better place. Like, have less incompetent people. Like, let's all build each other up. That's fine. But guess what? Show me a program that works, and I will help contribute towards it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a major issue is the disconnect there between people thinking that their tax dollars are going towards good programs.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, those sentiments, that's just all talk, and it just gets pigeonholed down the line, and it's like a selling point. They're great marketers for sure, but
Washington, D.C. is a PR stunt.
Oh, yeah.
So that hopefully someday in the long term, something gets done about all these problems. And I would actually compliment people like AOC who know how to run their PR in such a way where it gets so many people on board with their views on social media and all of that stuff. It's all a PR stunt.
But then back it up.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Back it up.
I know, but the problem is Democrats and Republicans, or maybe I should say liberals and conservatives, just to be on farther ends of the spectrum, they're so different. I don't think they're ever going to find common ground on most of these issues. So I think we should be more realistic and focused on compromise rather than agreement. They're never going to agree. I'm not going to lie. Whoever says that Republicans and Democrats want the same things but have a different way of getting there is a liar, in my opinion.
Well, I think hopefully one day we can find that common ground. Like you said, people are very polarized right now, but in bringing up some of these hot topics, let's start with abortion. So abortion is it's a hot topic right now, left to right, and I find it very interesting because it's one of those problems or challenges in our society that is oftentimes based in like faith and religion, and then the idea of people trying to tell a woman what she can or can't do with her body. And not only that, like many of these other topics, abortion, it's kind of like you see the topic and then conservative or liberal, you can already guesstimate like where someone's going to fall. But I want to just talk openly about the challenges there and just your guys' honest viewpoint of the subject. And Alex, I know you're a male, or I'm assuming that people are going to get triggered just by me assuming that, but
hope not.
Originally it was going to be two females to discuss this topic, but I still believe everybody, male, female, transgender, whomever you are, if you're an American and we're discussing this policy, everyone should have a seat at the table. Not to say people's opinions should be weighed evenly, but nonetheless, I still think a female should have the final say with what's going on. And Jaymie, I imagine with your child and your religious background and whatnot, you have a very heartfelt personal connection to the idea of stopping life and having legislation passed that is going to be affecting decision-making in your country and fellow Americans that don't agree with how abortion should be handled.
Right. So I kind of stopped arguing against abortion religiously, like as far as religious principles go, because not everyone's Christian. Very few people, even if they are Christian, know what the Bible says. So I like to come at it from more of a scientific philosophical, moral standpoint, because that's something that people can actually see without having to, read the Bible. So obviously my views on it are very strong, but they weren't always.
So when you're saying like a scientific standpoint, you could visually see something. So are you talking about like cells replicating, like life starting? That is something that you cannot hide from. That's
right. The fact that it's a scientific consensus that life begins the moment of conception, but also the entire development of the zygote, embryo, fetus, it's all science. The science is there, and every day the science and technology are improving to be able to decrease that gestational age for viability. So who knows, one day we could help a zygote survive, maybe not a zygote, a embryo survive at 9 weeks. So I hear the viability argument a lot. I hear them all under the sun because I'm just very vocal about it, and everyone gives me their input, which I honestly appreciate. I think we need to have more conversation about these tough topics rather than less. More conversation across party lines in general. But yeah, I don't even remember the question. I feel like I'm rambling.
No, it's okay. No, you were on point. So you were saying that kind of contradicts the idea of the late stage abortion to early stage. So you're saying that an early stage is just as important as like a full grown late stage baby, because we can take care of it outside of the womb.
Right. I think we're down to like 21 or 22 weeks that can survive with our medical technology that we have at this current moment. But I mean, other than that, there's still, I think it's 13,000 late term abortions a year in the U.S., just elective.
Do you know what the definition of late term is? I don't.
It is third trimester.
Got it. Okay.
So I think that's 27, 28 weeks.
I think those are in life-threatening circumstances only, though, because it's illegal to do third trimester abortion unless it threatens the life of the mother, if I'm correct.
Maybe Grant could look it up and we can keep going.
Yeah.
Look it up, Grant.
So Jaymie, like, what would be if you could put forth like the best argument against abortions, what would it be? Just.
Oh my gosh, how do I even decide? I have so many.
Like okay, let's hear multiple.
Oh gosh, I don't even know where to start.
It could be opinion based. It could be something that you deem factual. Just what would?
I like facts. I like logic.
Beautiful. So do I.
Let's see. Yeah. Well, one of the problems is obviously the science of it. Another thing is Democrats repeatedly vote. It seems like they are getting more radical in regards to their pro-choice views by the year. They just voted against the Born Alive abortion survivor bill, where an abortionist would not face criminal charges for murdering an infant that survives a botched abortion, whether by murder by neglect, or murder by intent. That's radical.
Wait, so
we're talking about murdering a baby, a living baby outside of the womb after it survived a botched abortion, which, to be fair, that is not common at all to survive an abortion, but it does happen. Democrats repeatedly vote against that, and they have been since the 90s.
So does that mean if like the abortion doesn't work and it's an actual baby outside the womb,
right,
someone still has the choice in the room to be like, I still don't want it.
Right.
Go take it out, per se.
Yeah. A lot of people don't even know that.
Oh, it's a little
this
freaky.
This is like news to you. I see. Yeah.
No, it is. And there's something that's always triggering in my head too, the difference between like people like to use the cracked egg example and comparing that to an actual baby, like let's say a crying baby like the difference between just a bundle of cells into this little alien Martian looking thing and then an actual baby that we're all used to seeing.
Wait, what? What do you mean?
So like people make the argument that an early stage abortion, when it's just like cells or it's just this little, doesn't even really look like a human yet, it's
okay.
In comparison to like what you just said, voting to still take that infant or the baby's life when it's an actual like crying outside the womb little baby. Like it looks like a real thing. The difference in imagery to that, that's something that's always like stuck with me.
It's a juxtaposition for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's any like weight to compare the two. I think there kind of is.
Mm-hmm.
It hurts me more to see like a baby, like a late stage abortion in comparison to something like very early on. Just visually, that's just something that triggers in my head. It hurts a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I get that, and a lot of people, I would say almost most people think that way, but it's the same baby. It's at a different stage in development, though, just as in a newborn turns into an infant, different stage of development, turns into a toddler, turns into a kid, a teenager, etc. It's the same being. It's the same human life, and that's kind of where I come at it at a philosophical point of view argument. It's the same exact life. It just looks a little different because it's not as developed as later stages of life, just like the same thing outside of the womb.
Do you have any strong opinions on it, Alex?
I mean, I think that's a very valid point. Personally, as being a guy, I think I can only put so much forward as to this topic because, I'm of the ilk that women are the ones that, like you said, have the final say. Like any girl would have a better opinion of this than me, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's always been a very touchy issue. Like I kind of flip-flopped on it a lot when I was younger, but I'm pretty pro-choice when it comes down to it. I've, from like philosophy classes, I've never really like considered, and like no offense, like, and I know you recognize this too, you don't bring faith into a topic like this because, scientific issues religion or faith have no place in a scientific discussion, bottom of the line. So I can't really cite any like religious background, but like philosophically speaking, I think that no woman would be obligated to see a pregnancy to its ending, at least from an early point, because, birth is a very traumatic event. And I don't think the state is really in a place to be like, if a 13-year-old is pregnant, be like, you better have that kid. That's something about that is what doesn't really sit right with me, like the regulation of the body itself. Is what it comes down to, is the government regulating a person's actual physical being.
The government does that all the time, though.
Oh, yeah.
People talk about bodily autonomy. Well, I can take my body, go drunk drive a car, and go kill you.
But you're putting others at risk at that point. If you're a mother with a baby in you, I say, yeah, and if it's third trimester, that's definitely questionable. But like, honestly, if it's a child that accidentally got pregnant, and it's like a 13-year-old, if they were raped or something like that, I think absolutely they deserve an abortion.
So people bring up the rape scenario quite often. I think it's valid to ask and bring to the table.
And it happens a lot.
Yeah, Jaymie. So if there's a young woman who is raped and doesn't have the foundation there financially, or doesn't have a strong family life, and it was literally taken against her will, and this act occurs, and then now she has this little growing child inside of her. How would you go forth in solving that?
So I see abortion and rape as almost the same thing, an act of violence against an innocent human being. So it's complicated, and I know the system's not perfect, but there, right at this moment, 1 million parents or want to be parents on the waiting list for adoption to adopt a baby. There's just not enough babies to go around, because I think we're up to 1 million a year abortions in the US only, not even in the world. Also, the rape argument is my favorite one because it is the easiest one. Those make up, so rape, incest, and fetal abnormalities altogether make up 1% of abortions. The other 99% convenience. Oh, I don't feel like it, I don't have enough money, etc. There is you don't have to keep the baby. There are plenty of people on the waiting list, in the US at least, who want babies and they can't have them for reasons that I think are attributed to all the chemicals in our food. I just posted an article about this too. I don't know if you saw it, but our sperm count, y'all's sperm count, men today, your sperm count is less than half of what your grandfather's was at your age.
I've heard that too.
I saw
it's
this
kind of
article
crazy
the other day.
Yeah.
I've heard
It's
about
insane.
I mean,
It's all the chemicals.
I haven't gotten tested, but I'd like to think I'm healthy and good to go. But we'll see.
Dude, yeah.
Maybe that's taking into account all of the unhealthy individuals and obesity, and I know there's different factors at play there. But okay, Jaymie. So to break down what you said first, because I see both sides. So you're saying that worst case scenario, the 1% issue for rape, or even a subset of 1%, less than 1%
Subset of 1%,
would be
right.
rape. Nonetheless, it's still something that occurs in our borders. Therefore, we have to like take it into account. So that individual, that woman, would have to just be virtuous and be like, this happened to me, even though I don't want the child. Now I must go through with growing this child to maybe at the end give it up for adoption. That's just part of my life at this point after this tragic act. Because is there another way to look at it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Because now you're basically like, we're so sorry. This should never happen. Obviously, we're in agreement that the rape should have never occurred.
Mm-hmm.
But she's now presented with this scenario. And let's say she has the facts of there's all these families that would be blessed to have a child. She at that point has to just tell herself, okay, even though I don't want this child, I have to go forth and growing it to then give it up to what other way is there to?
It's like you kind of said, it's an act of virtue. It just kind of shows where your morals are at, like where your priorities are at. And for me, I obviously would just never have an abortion no matter what. There are plenty of other options, like I said, giving up for adoption. And I know, of course, it still happens. Of course, women are still raped and they get pregnant from it. But delegating policies in this country around such a minuscule percentage of our population is quite frankly ridiculous.
Okay, so I hear that. So what you're saying is that the state should have the power to basically not give that woman the choice to carry that child to be virtuous in that way. What you're saying is that the state like has to enforce whether she wants it or not. Like
enforcement is enforcement. That's not gonna changing laws isn't gonna prevent all abortions. Obviously, people still did abortions, whether it was physicians illegally or those sketchy at-home abortions before Roe versus Wade was passed. But it is, I actually looked it up. I think 72% of women said that if it was illegal, they would not have an abortion.
If it was illegal?
Yeah, illegal.
Okay. So their perspective on the issue would change if it was illegal.
Was technically illegal, yeah.
They would be like, oh, I don't want to run this red light or run this stop sign because it's illegal.
I guess so. I think a lot of people think like that.
Yeah, because most people like to follow laws. All right, yeah, I hear it. It's interesting. I brought up the religious aspect of it earlier because at least my perception is in the political realm, whether it's coming for Trump or our different leaders, a lot of people on the conservative side strap it to the idea of
faith.
Like faith.
Yeah.
Like faith.
I was pretty surprised you didn't cite that. That's
yeah, I have seen that in the realm, so that's why I brought it up. But nonetheless, you guys don't seem to make, or you, Jaymie, don't seem to make the religious argument with it. You're just kind of treating it like, I realize
that doesn't work because obviously not everyone is Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I'm not trying to tell you what religion to be, but I just like to present facts. And to me, like I said, delegating policy around such a minuscule percentage of the population, I like to compare it to, I don't want to trigger anyone, but I like to compare it to forcing a shutdown, an economic shutdown, forcing all small businesses to close, forcing everyone to wear 2 masks now because of a virus that kills a minuscule percentage of elderly or sick people. I like to compare it to that because I am not for that at all either.
I hear you. I think we overshot the COVID shutdown. Initially, we didn't know what was going to happen. We kind of over-prepared a little bit. But the problem with, I think, a lot of people in general and then our systems is there's no course correction. It's like, oh, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. Let's actually open things up and be a little bit more reasonable, at least from what I've gathered. Rogan's referenced it on his podcast before. I believe he spoke with the Texas governor, that there was a political agenda behind keeping the shutdown extended through Trump's term, just to kind of correlate all this negative economic stuff going on with, we could blame it on Trump. And now he didn't, he also didn't shut down as fast as he should have been, or as fast as he should have, in my opinion. But nonetheless, I've thought about it. Behind closed doors, you have a nation of all these tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people. And do you want to shut everything down and burn the economy? Do you want to let everything stay open and possibly kill a bunch of people? You're weighing and measuring, and then finally things are shut down. And here we are over a year later. But
Yeah.
to get back on topic to the abortion. So, it's so tough because I get a vision too of, I kind of compare it back to the days when the state would like accuse a woman of like being a witch. Just the idea of state telling a woman or anybody for that matter what they should be doing and not allowing the individual to make that choice, even if there's a huge percentage of the population that doesn't agree with it. I generally lean towards the side of, that's a scary thought for me when the state puts forth regulations that tell anyone really what to do.
It's a slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope. But the same thing, like you said, with COVID, I'm not on board with the state being able to tell people what to do to the extent in which they've done it, because I think if people were dropping like flies in the street, if it was something like bubonic plague-like,
for sure,
people have the intuition to be scared and stay indoors. You're going to self-regulate at that point. And that's not what we've seen at all.
It absolutely goes against logic. It defies all logic. It's like, if you had asked me 10 years ago, there's going to be, this disease outbreak that comes along, or how do you think Americans would respond? I would have told you, we're just going to take the L. We're going to take the initiative and actually go all gung ho for it. But we keep
regulate and like
and regulating is at least as far as because there's so many things we can do. We're in a developed world now. There's ways to prevent the spread of an illness. It's not like rocket science. You keep people apart, then it goes to show it shows that you're not gonna spread it if people aren't together. It's kind of.
So do you think that we kind of overshot?
I think.
Preventing COVID and the spread?
That's a tough question because it's comparing these many deaths to these many deaths. There's gonna be deaths regardless of how we prepare for it, how we try and mitigate these risks. I think that there could have been a better job done with the shutdown. I think the way that it was administered was a little questionable. How it was rolled out, but especially with reopening happening and then closing, reopening, closing. That's going to be a detriment to the entire thing. If we're really trying to see the disease work its way out of us, I don't think that what we've done has been the correct way of doing it.
Do you have a way in which, I know you're not an expert in solving these viral issues, but do you have a way in which we should have done it? Because you said deaths to deaths, and that's something I've thought about a lot, is the unintended consequences of a shutdown. And I think, for example, was it Japan 2 months ago?
Yeah.
Had a higher death count from suicide than all of their COVID cases combined.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that when they're all sitting down scrambling, like, holy shit, we got this virus. We don't know what's going to happen. Some of these scientists don't know. Mm-hmm. Let's shut everything down. for a duration of time which wasn't really defined at that point, are they thinking about, oh wait, is everyone going to get depressed and our suicide rate's going to go up?
Yeah.
There's all these different factors that are going in, and no one thinks about that. But it should be communicated to the public. So I remember sitting in on one of my roommates' conference calls, and it was the mayor of Newport early on in COVID, or maybe like midway, was talking about how the Hoag Hospital down in Newport, that their main concern wasn't COVID. This was when Newsom was trying to shut down the beaches. Their main concern wasn't COVID because they had open beds. It was the fact that they're getting calls left and right for like suicidal thoughts and depression and people like harming themselves in his city and in his echo chamber. He's like, I have my thumb on the issue here. I'm hearing these calls. I'm getting this data. Why, Governor Newsom, are you putting forth and sending down these top-down orders when you don't know what's going on in my community? I do. And this is what's happening. And it's just... God, there's so many different ways you can cut it, and I don't think we did a good job. Just literally our elected leaders not doing the best job in solving the COVID issues.
No, I totally agree with that.
Especially the beach thing, like closing the beaches. People don't even. I guess they could have gone outside, but in Newport, what else is there to do? But sit on the beach. You can socially distance. It's outside.
Yeah.
Who cares? But when I actually went to the beach when it was closed because I'm very just like that. Yeah.
Your son, it was you, your mom, and your son surfing, right?
Yeah.
I remember.
And there was no one there, and I was like, "This is so weird."
All the waves are mine.
Yeah. Like, you just walk past this little, like, sign that said it was closed. I posted that, like, a picture of my kid at the beach during that time when Newsom first closed all the beaches. I got so much heat in my DMs for going to the damn beach. People were like, "You're leaving your germs on the sand."
Jesus
and I was like, "Dude,
Christ.
You're crazy." Like, I'm outside, and the closest person to me besides my family is like a mile away.
Oh,
it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Have you ever had someone like really threaten you or get super pissed on social media? What's like the word? You don't have to name drop, but like the one that stands out where you're like, holy shit.
Someone told me, I used to work at a restaurant. I don't think I should say which one, but
yeah, it's okay. It's not necessary.
But they fired everyone when COVID hit because that was just the logical thing to do because obviously everything was shutting down. And it was honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me. All those people who worked there were super, like, I don't have a problem with liberals, but they were very aggressive towards anyone who held like a different viewpoint, which is why I basically didn't have any friends there. But anyways, this one guy who I used to work there with, who was always nice to me, I was always nice to him. We were like fine. He told me that he wishes I would die because I don't remember what I posted, but it was something so non-offensive. Because some things I post are offensive, I'm not going to lie. But it was something so non-offensive that I was just like, are you serious? You want me to die?
Holy shit.
Yeah, people are crazy.
I can't imagine being that upset to say something like that.
Really?
But the problem is they slide into my DMs, they say things like this to me, and then they block me. So I can't see what they're saying. I can't see their point of view, which is a huge problem. I don't want to be in this like conservative bubble echo chamber, which is why I haven't gone on Parler. I haven't gone on Gab. It's all conservatives there since big tech banned all of these conservative accounts. I have no interest in not learning, not growing, not seeing any other perspective and just being in this conservative echo chamber, hearing my own thoughts repeated back to me.
That's commendable. You want to get feedback.
Yeah, and I like to see the other side because how else am I going to discern truth? And, that I see it that way, but a lot of people blocked me and it's counterproductive. And it's not like I was bullying them or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even talk to most of these people who blocked me, but I was like looking at their stuff and they were looking at my stuff. They didn't like my stuff, so they blocked me. And I just think it's unfortunate that that's where we're at.
And that's how people treat social media, because I'm assuming that you said it was a man who said this to you.
It was a gay guy.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
I can see it.
A little feisty.
a little feisty.
He maybe wouldn't have said that to you to your face. Like if he was sitting right here,
Never.
he wouldn't have said it.
No.
But social media cultivates that type of communication sometimes. And people have their right. I think it's an open forum platform on a private sector, like a private company, which is up for debate. I've heard the argument that it should be treated like water and electricity, because it should be treated like a town square or a park.
Because it's there.
Because it's there.
It's there for everyone.
But it cultivates that communication. And it's fun. You brought up, I went on a date how long ago was it? Maybe 6 months ago. Definitely not going to name drop, but the most like hate-filled liberal I've ever met in my life. To where I'm a very like reasonable person, at least I think I am. I don't claim left or right. I'm very topic oriented, and I just want to have a conversation and try to be a good person. And sometimes that puts me on the left, sometimes it puts me on the right. But you said like that person wished that you would die. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it was something along the lines of like all conservatives are like evil. They should all be like dead, them and their families. And I'm sitting at the table, like after a couple of shots of tequila.
Like, I'm going to get out of here.
No.
And at this point, I'm like, oh my God, like this exists. So I look back on it now, and it helped build my perspective in a certain way, because I had never met someone like that. So now I was taking into account these accounts that I see on social media, or the communication in our country at large. There are people like that who exist.
On both sides.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, and then there's people like, God, it's sad as hell what just happened. What was it, 2 days ago? Was it considered a mass shooting, a hate crime against
In Georgia?
the Asian folk?
He said it wasn't because they were Asian, but then, that's a little suspect.
So what, it's hate and mass at that point?
Yeah.
It's just, there's people that I truly try to understand, because I can't. I'm trying to understand that I would want to wish someone's death, or say what was coming out of this woman's mouth across the table for me, or God forbid, go use a firearm and take people's lives because of a belief that you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's comparable to running into a group of people with a suicide vest. That just these belief systems and the variance and how strong they are. Are you able to talk about it and remain calm and try to focus on solutions and common ground? Or do you get a little triggered? Are you the type of person that will raise your voice? Are you the type of person that gets genuinely angry and yells and is spiteful and is uncomfortable to be around? Or are you someone that's going to go pick up a firearm and take someone's life?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it trips me out. But
What did you say? I have to know on the date. If
I
you
was
remember.
No, I remember. I mean, I was driving that night, but I was just more looking for an out. I wasn't pushing back at that point. I was kind of just playing the neutral card, like, oh yeah, like, fuck, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. What do you even say to that,
God, such a beautiful woman too, but yeah, it is what it is. So we were able to talk openly about abortion a little bit, and it sounds like you and I are in agreement that the state shouldn't have the right to tell someone what to do. Maybe you could present information and arguments and facts to coach a woman into making a more virtuous choice, with the ability of, we have all these families that would love to adopt your child, and this would be an amazing blessing. You could bring forth this life and it would be taken care of. That kind of contradicts a lot of the or it combats a lot of the arguments that say a child that would be born into a very like low economic state and not have the same opportunities and what have you. It's like, no, we're developing systems in our country that would give that child the same opportunity, or the best opportunity possible. But nonetheless, even if you don't want to go forth with having that child, you would have to get to that point.
And I think sorry to interrupt, something that we both would agree on is that there needs to be more education about how people become pregnant, especially because if you consider the statistics of like lower income neighborhoods, their abortion rates or at least their teenage motherhood rates are so much higher than, middle income, upper income neighborhoods. And obviously there's a correlation between lower education in lower income and having kids at a younger age. So if you can raise that education level, then, there's got to be at least a little bit of positive impact from that. You show these kids like, hey, make condoms more available, make Planned Parenthood visits more available if you're trying to check up on the child's health. I'm not saying to have an abortion, but I'm saying make it so that there's more of these resources available so that they don't feel so pressured into like, oh, I have to go in a back alley, have an abortion. Or you're approaching them with these moral dilemmas like, oh, you're a 12-year-old and you're pregnant, but you're a bad person if you abort that kid, like this is a 12-year-old girl you're talking to. Like you only have such high expectations of how they're going to handle being told something like that, So it comes down to like showing these kids, hey, this is really like, this isn't just a decision to be taken lightly having a kid, especially at a young age. You have to weigh it out. There has to be a higher level of making kids aware of something like that. At least I think,
I totally agree in that aspect, like making them more aware of what exactly parenting is, because the way that sex ed is nowadays, like pretty young kids are getting educated on condoms and birth control and what have you, but they're not really, they can't, and part of it is because they're so young, they can't grasp what exactly parenthood is.
Yeah.
Like the responsibility, the commitment, like that shit is hard. And it's something that they can't exactly wrap their heads around, but it's also an issue that goes back to family dynamics, culture too, but family issues.
You mean like their support system?
Right.
That's
like,
a good point too, yeah.
Like all those statistics about the fathers not being in the home, like not having that supportive nuclear family set, and those kids being, I think it's like 70% more likely to end up in prison. I don't know what the statistic is for teenage pregnancy, but I know it's higher than people who have the support system of a nuclear family. So I think a lot of issues in our society today go back to the family structure and how we can kind of repair that. And that's one of like the core conservative beliefs is like a strong family structure, like the nuclear family, both parents. And it is backed by data, but it is also a rather partisan view.
And I honestly, like, just coming from like an anthropological background, the nuclear family is very high importance when it comes to development of a human. That's an objective fact, especially, as humans being altruistic creatures that we are, there's a certain level of expected, rearing to be done by a father, even if you consider that largely human babies are raised by the mother, even in the wild bonobos, but the male is still present, They
Are
still
the
contribute
bonobos
resources.
the other species that mates with one female for life?
No.
Is that the one? Oh.
No, I think they
they're
all fuck each
extremely,
other, right?
Yes, that's
okay.
that's the closest.
There's like
link
one
to
other
humans.
species.
No, bonobos.
It's like ducks, mallard ducks mate for life. I think.
Well, I think
Penguins, a couple of things, but not
dolphins.
chimp.
Oh, I think it was
orcas.
penguins.
Yeah, but
penguins-
not chimps and
penguins
bonobos.
are rad.
They bang everyone.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Dang.
saying.
But yeah, there's that assumed level of altruism, and it's just circumstances dictate sometimes that nuclear family is lacking, and there's always going to be issues revolving around that unless you're just a very steadfast, like really strong person and you can persevere in spite of things like that. But for the most part, that's really going to put you behind in life.
Yeah, I
Right.
agree, because there'll be those outliers that make it out of the slums per se.
Yeah.
Let's say you were born from a really broken down family or a single mother who was super young, and like you brought up earlier in building education in some of these lower economic areas, because it becomes a cycle at that point of, if you notice that this abortion challenge is happening in certain like income areas and certain demographics, then how do you go forth in solving it? Maybe the education and trying to build them up to more of that nuclear family.
Yeah.
There's people out there that just by virtue of being a nuclear family, they get upset about it, or they don't like the idea of that America. It's like, oh, that was just to like increase.
Too traditional.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
too old school.
I think it comes down to what makes you happy, and then just looking at the statistics too of if you're going to make it in American society today. It's unfortunate that there's certain patterns of decision making that are going to make your life easier in our system, and some people don't like that, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
I want to move on to climate change. And
wait. Okay, going back to the bodily autonomy argument that I hear a lot too. The body in my body, I'm going to say, because I'm the only girl here, is not my body. From the moment of conception, science backs this. From the moment of conception, that zygote, I guess we'll call it, is a distinct living and whole human being. It has its unique DNA, blood type, etc. So that's where I think that bodily autonomy argument kind of fails, because you're talking about two human beings being affected, technically. So that was my opinion on that.
Okay, that's a good point, because I heard an argument too the other day of like if you heard your neighbor beating or killing their dog, for example, and you were like on the other end of the fence,
right?
Do you have the right? So I'm comparing this to like other individuals in society having a judgment on that life form that's in that woman. Like, do you have the right to either like call the cops or have there be some sort of law that protects that life? I mean, it's because I get what you're saying. It's two life forms at that point. It's you and the thing that's growing inside of you. There's nothing to truly compare it to because it's so unique in itself.
It is. It's a very philosophical question, and it comes down to the whole thing of like what consciousness and everything.
I like to compare it to slavery, because at one point in our history, slaves were not considered persons, just like legally, just as the unborn are not considered persons today legally because we can kill them. Although if you murder a pregnant woman, it is double homicide. So basically it's a person if you want it, but not a person if you don't want it, which is a legal flaw. But
it's a fair point.
Would you support someone's right to choose to have a slave and treat it like a cattle?
No, but I think this starts bringing up the point of like consciousness and like recognizing human, like a lively human like characteristic in a crying child or opening its eyes or
so
just
consciousness is a value-giving trait.
I think humans weigh and measure, because I know I do sometimes. Just in answering your question, like, is a slave equivalent to a 2-week-old fetus or whatever you call it?
Consciously, no, as far as consciousness.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. Are those equal, or should they be treated equal? Because I think that's the difference. If you're talking about treating a slave, a human being that could speak and is walking in the world and is literally this thing in front of you, a fellow human being, that's gonna have a different play in your brain than trying to present that argument to a bundle of cells. I think that's just inevitable. People aren't going to treat that the same. It's hard for me to.
That just comes down to level of development. A newborn can't talk to you. They're a hopeless sack of potatoes. Like
they're so cute though.
I know, but they're still dependent on their mom for everything. Like just as an embryo or a fetus is, it's just comes down to the level of development. But also you can compare, as you were saying, the level of consciousness to someone who's, a vegetable on life support, someone with in a coma, Alzheimer's, stuff like that. Like, is consciousness a value-giving trait? Because if it is, you should kill all those people too. So that's kind of the problem with all the pro-choice arguments that I see. They can all be used, shouldn't be, and mostly not. But all these arguments can be used to kill living people too. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. So, in killing living people, like in terms of the death penalty, or you mean if someone makes
people used to kill their slaves. Like you said, level of consciousness. Let's just kill all the vegetables, all the people in comas that we have. You know what I mean?
That's another argument too. People isn't there like litigation that was filed about, or legislation rather, about someone that's in a coma, like when the family has the ability to draw that line and pull the plug.
Yeah,
I
when
think
they assume power of attorney or whatever over that.
Yeah, like to literally take their life and whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is comparable because let's say you have, what do you call it when your brain's like mush or brain dead, and when you're just laying there, a vegetable brain or whatever.
Vegetative state is the technical term.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a variance there of someone that comes out of it and can end up like living or whatever, but the vast majority being just a vegetative state laying there. Is that equal to that fetus now? Because it's not.
Absolutely not, because that fetus, unless interfered with, will be a living, breathing, fully functional human being.
Okay, but the reason I brought it up though is because, to my understanding, was when you were comparing the slave to the veggie brain, it's a matter of that person isn't conscious or isn't like equivalent to a normal
someone else,
like functioning human. Therefore, we could take their life, the veggie brain and the slave.
But from a fundamental moral standpoint, it's never good to kill a slave, you know, because that's still a person. So it's not really a fair comparison to be drawn, because you can never make the moral argument of like, oh, I'm going to kill my slave because I own the slave, because that comes down to like, well, that's a law that a government put into place that doesn't have anything to do with morals or you philosophically. It's just a government trying to control others. So I don't know if there's really a way to compare like a slave owner killing a slave to a woman aborting a baby. I don't know if that's might be a false equivalency.
Timing in the equation, I think to the factor of T, the time of it is something you have to really weigh and measure. That there is a vast difference in making the decision at the point whether you want to abort a child and then murdering a grown adult slave. You know, I think it's just.
I think it's something you should be careful with.
Well, no,
comparing the two.
I mean, it's a valid thing to bring up.
The reason I compare it is because the unborn are not considered persons legally. Slaves were not considered persons legally. Jews, I don't know about their legal status, but they weren't considered persons.
Got it.
After World War II, they were all killed.
Right, but it's always been immoral to kill Jews or kill slaves. That's coming down to a moral fundamental, is like not really, like laws don't really matter, you know? Like
that's what I'm saying. Legal, like there's flaws in our laws.
Okay, so you're saying eventually, let's say 100 years from now, we might look back on aborting babies just like we look back on. I
totally think we will, honestly. Maybe not in my lifetime, but eventually I think we will. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. It flip-flops. Obviously, with this administration, we're heading in the complete opposite direction. Yeah. But you never know.
I think that's the beauty of our system, though, is the 4-year terms and the balance and change there. But nonetheless, if you have the vast majority of society leaning towards one direction, I think, and you keep electing those like-minded representatives,
it's going to become
then
more.
It could go the direction like you're pointing out, Jaymie, or it could go the complete opposite. And then also you have the state factors there too, where you'll have an individual state that might be left or right, and that even provides, in my opinion, more balance in the United States as a whole. But it also could lead to like civil war and uprising and stuff.
Right. So the abortion rate overall in the U.S. has been steadily declining since the 80s, and I attribute it to the ultrasound being invented. People could actually see what they're doing, what they're killing, like what it is. I mean, they're not doing it themselves. It's obviously a doctor doing it. But I think that steady decline is related to the growing conscience of Americans. So, I mean, obviously, like you said, we'll see where we end up. But I think it is a possibility that we look back on this, just looking at the data, the steady decline, as how we look at the genocide of the Jews today.
Okay.
I think it's a possibility.
It's a possibility and it's valid, and I think that's one variable amongst many, like resources and just improvements in science and just taking care of our people at a better rate, which I think we're doing statistically. like there's just less poverty and less harm than there was.
Mortality
like
rates.
Yeah,
gone
mortality.
down, so.
Exactly. So that's gonna decrease that too. But all right, let's move on to climate change and fossil fuels, because they kind of mirror each other. And with our recent administration, we had the pipeline shut down, and this is something everyone can relate to because we see gas prices going through the roof. But with climate change, it's another topic that is supposed to be bedded in science, but it's got such a political leaning to it. It's another thing where, like, oh, are you Democrat or Republican? I could probably guess what your opinion is on climate change. And it's a fascinating subject to me because I've always been super into like earth science and the galaxy at large, and tectonic plates and oil and the oceans and just everything about nature. I'm in love with it, obsessed with it. I can't spend too much time thinking about it as much as I'd like, just with good old capitalistic America and work, just my majority of my brain power is delegated towards that stuff. But it's something that is supposed to be bedded in science. And we have been told for a while now with the global warming trend that the Earth is heating up. It's warming, and it's changing weather patterns, and polar ice caps are melting, and it is because of human actions here on planet Earth. So we'll start with you, Alex. Do you have any opinions on the matter of like do you believe in global warming? Do you think that, and it's just weird saying that, do you believe in global warming?
It's kind of a silly question.
It is, yeah. Do you think that humans are having an impact on the environment?
Right. So going off that, I believe that the Earth does go through cycles, and we're actually in the end of an ice age right now, technically. So it is warming, and it's hard to say like what could cause it, but then again, it's not, because temperatures have been rising since the 1950s at abnormally compared to like millennium before us. They've never been at the levels. So what's the only variable that's changed? In the last 100 years, carbon levels have gone through the roof because of industrialism. You can't really attribute it to volcanoes or any other like phenomenon, because it's plain and simple in front of you. Humans produce pollution. It's going to have an inverse effect on a biome, like we're organic. So the introduction of chemicals into any ecosystem is always going to have some kind of adverse effect. And it's just a matter of like mitigating that release of chemicals,
Mitigating and measuring. So
absolutely.
I like where you're coming, because I've tried to format my way of thinking in any system. You literally have an abundance of inputs and outputs, and you just compare. You take sample sets over time. This is something that's really important with global warming, and you measure inputs and outputs. So people sometimes will make the argument like, whoa, the Earth's been way warmer before. There's been way more carbon in our atmosphere at given points in time.
Right, but not in 3 million years, maybe.
No, that's a fact. That's true. You can look at the fossil records and see that carbon has been much higher in our atmosphere than now, due to like volcanic activity.
Yeah.
But that's actually misconstruing the whole point, because you're not measuring whether the carbon is higher or lower to previous points in history. It's with our current operations on Earth, how humans live their life, how we have homes right next to the ocean, how we have different like crop yields, how we are conditioned and have adapted to certain levels of like weather patterns and hurricanes and what have you. Is the way we're living now sustainable, or is there going to be harm to us as a whole when measuring the output from these different systems of input, being like industrialism, burning fossil fuels, having engines, like billions of cars around the world. So these are all different inputs that you have to measure. And then you ask yourself, what are the potential outcomes, positive or negative? And that's really it. You can calculate, wait, is the worst thing that's going to happen is some super rich people who live on the coast are going to have their homes flooded? Is that all that bad just from global warming?
Yeah.
Or is there something that's potentially like crucial in terms of like weather patterns that are going to potentially take human life because they're going to get so drastic and change. So these are all different inputs and outputs that you measure in any system.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of the scientific process is you try to trust in that to frame your way of thinking.
Yeah.
But people have turned it into something really political where it just it trips me out because I'm like, wait. Like science, whether you're Democratic or Republican, is supposed to be like a tool, like a wrench that everyone uses this wrench to take off this bolt off an engine. Like we trust in the wrench to do its job. Science is something that we're supposed to trust in, which is also malleable. It changes over time, like as new data comes out. But the general premise of just measuring data over time and whether humans are going to be affected positively or negatively based on the amount of carbons that are going into the atmosphere. But Jaymie, okay, so that was a little rant there, but I thought it was relevant.
Yeah, I think so.
What's your opinion on the matter? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's a hoax? Do you think they're blowing it up and it's real but maybe not as extreme?
I think, isn't it a scientific fact that it's real? Don't nearly all scientists agree? I think it's 97% of scientists agree that climate change is indeed real, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, so I am not a climate change denier, as Newsom likes to call all Republicans.
There we go. Okay, we see
That's
here.
good.
This is a pivotal point where there's gonna be people out there like, oh my God, she's a Republican and she thinks that climate change is real. You know, it's just. But that's the beauty of this.
That was so funny when he said that. He was on the news like every single day when COVID first hit, Newsom, and he was like, I have no tolerance for climate change deniers. And I was just like, what the heck? Those exist? Like, I don't really understand that. And I don't really know any other Republicans who are like, this is fake. This is a conspiracy theory. We have a lot of other conspiracy theories, but that is not one of them that I'm aware of, at least not in my peer group. And like I said, I do not know much about fossil fuels. I did read up about the Keystone Pipeline being canceled when that first happened because I forget the number of thousands of jobs that it cost. And I just think, and maybe other conservatives think this way as well, I think there's a moral hierarchy, and I think human beings will always come, or should always come, before preserving the land or whatever. You know what I mean? So if something like canceling the Keystone Pipeline is literally ruining lives, damaging our economy, alienating an ally, Canada, and empowering our adversaries, I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that's worth the environment, honestly. And the thing is, the way that we dig up fossil fuels here, there's all these environmental regulations, there's all these labor regulations. The Middle East, which is where we're getting it from now, since it was canceled, since we're energy dependent now, they don't have those. They don't have environmental regulations. They don't have labor regulations. It's so much dirtier. It's so much worse for the environment to have them supply it, not only in that way with the lack of regulations, but also the way it gets here on those giant tanks that ship it over. They're just dumping all their oil in the oceans.
Yeah, it's sad. What's screaming at me is it's piss poor problem solving. So when you say that we have to either put people or the environment first, I don't see it that way. I think we could solve the issue and take care of both. In, let's say, completely shutting down the pipeline like right away and putting a bunch of people out of work and ruining families. Like, put yourself in the position sitting down at a dinner table and you're someone that just got laid off from the government shutting down what puts food on your table. I understand that is tragic, but I also see the tragedy in destroying the environment with, as you said in the beginning, is an undeniable science, a truth that the environment's changing most likely based on our fossil fuel emissions. So I think what you have to do is put forth a plan where we strategize in maybe removing oil from the ground through the pipeline, but we know in the future that we're going to have to step away from fossil fuels just by virtue of, if you think about, there's these pools of what used to be, or is it still organic material and oil? But it used
petroleum.
to be petroleum. Yeah, so it used to be like dead plants, like organic material, and we are pulling it out of the ground and then spewing it into the atmosphere just by virtue of that process. If you think about it very plainly, like, okay, wait, this seems funky. Like, we're pulling this substance out, burning it, and it makes this really funky, like weird looking black smoke. You know, like that feeling you get when you see an 18-wheeler like just floor it and this black puff of... There's something about it, at least in my head, that screams like, you know what, that doesn't look good.
It's super weird considering the sun produces enough power to, power like 18 trillion light bulbs per second, and we're pulling shit out of the ground to power our cars.
So that would be an input into solving that problem, is
renewable
we
energy.
know that. So we had this investment in building this pipeline. It was going to make us more energy independent. We're not relying on the Middle East. It drives prices down for consumers. That's all great. But then you also have to weigh and measure, whoa, this price being driven down, us finding another source to pull oil out of the ground and then spew it into the atmosphere, even though that's good economically for like pricing and business. But are we now putting the environment too much on the back burner? Yeah. But if we just shut down the pipeline, are we putting environment too much on the forefront, and now we're ruining humans' lives? So there's this shift that goes back and forth. So if I was putting forth policy and trying to solve that, it would be like, okay, let's develop a long-term plan of easing our way out of these fossil fuels while we build up a more sustainable system. So you edge back on the fossil fuels, those jobs, and maybe you develop programs that retrain on how to build solar. Because I imagine these people they're not connected to the oil in terms of like, my heart and soul is into this, my life's ruined if you shut down this pipeline. It's more so like, no, we just need like jobs and food on the table. And maybe you could develop a system where you edge out the oil, you build up solar and other renewables, and there's a steady shift. That seems so intuitive, and edging something out. You don't just, all right, here's taxpayers' money, let's build up this pipeline, and then, new administration, no, let's shut it down, and then...
It's such a waste of all that money, but also I'm not sure why, but it is a fact that because one of the things the Biden administration said when they shut down the Keystone Pipeline was, just go get a solar panel job. That they literally said that. Their press secretary said that. But
to do it? No, just go do it.
I mean, yeah, well, there's that too. But
I'm critiquing them though, because it's like, okay, have a system in place. Well, okay, you don't want the pipeline to exist. Well, what's the transition for all these people you're putting out of work in developing infrastructure that you see fit?
Yeah. I imagine that's their plan eventually, to develop something like that. But as of right now, solar panel jobs pay $20,000 less on average than the gas and oil jobs. So that's a hit, especially for lower income families. And that's the thing about politics. Most of it, I don't know if I should say most of it. A lot of these policies affect lower income individuals, like the rising of gas prices. The lower income families are the ones counting their pennies to make their electric bill, putting $10 in their tank at a time because they just can't afford it.
So that would be an input in solving that problem. Like, okay, we know that people can pay this price and they're going to be really put out, their life's going to change in a negative way if the gas prices go up. So that 30-year time frame of shifting to solar, or 50-year, maybe it becomes 70 or 80. And it's just, that's a factor that our politicians need to take into account, because like you said, there's people out there, and maybe it's not affecting us this way, that are literally like, holy shit, I can't get to where I need to go because I can't afford gas.
Yeah.
Elon Musk made this argument, though, that in economics, when you put forth those policies that change pricing of oil, you can kind of shift consumer habits based on controlling the price. So if you make oil more expensive, it kind of forces the consumer to shift into more of like an electric vehicle market, or you start actively thinking now, okay, I can't afford gasoline anymore, therefore I have to use these other alternatives.
Yeah.
It's just the rate in which you roll that out is what's important.
It comes down to opportunity costs, you know, like what are you willing to give up in order to make a better future for our grandkids and great grandkids, you know, because it's like you said it's comparing like the environment to people, but it's just comparing people to people 100 years from now. Because like, you know, I think there's a misconception like save the environment, like trees are so pretty, like look at how nice it is. It's like, I don't really give a shit about that. I just want my grandkids to be able to like breathe when they're alive.
You're right. And not only that,
like I don't care about the national parks, like that's cool and all, but I just don't want so many like noxious gases in the air.
I've heard that argument before. It's the earth will live on whether we're here or not. The earth doesn't really give a shit whether we're here.
But they will make us not be here if it needs to, is kind of.
Well, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's a thinking organism to where
no,
like,
but it's scientific.
I'm gonna make this hurricane go kill this group of people because they're putting.
Oh no, that's not what I'm saying.
You know,
it will cure itself of us eventually if we keep doing bad to it, because that's just physics.
I like what you're saying though, because you're comparing humans' lifestyles now to humans' lifestyles in the future, and just the ability to sustain, like let's say the crops that we need to feed our population. Mm-hmm. Is there going to be a future potentially through climate change where we don't have enough crop yield to feed? Like that's a serious problem. Absolutely. You know, anyone would think that's serious.
So do you think the Middle East has any plan or desire to move towards solar panels or whatever, green energy? I don't know,
but regardless of if it's their plan or not, I don't think it should take away from us wanting to do better, if that makes sense.
And it ties into
like that doesn't really
the idea that I believe in, that America is that city
way
upon the hill, and we do lead the way, and we should take pride in that, and that's a beautiful thing. And we've got like the like our allies and whatnot who are already ahead of us, and there's arguments that they have less population, and there's different factors why they can switch to more renewables faster than we can. But nonetheless, I'm proud to take the leadership stance and be the nation that moves towards that cleaner sector, because even though the Middle East isn't doing it, they'll hurt just by virtue of us not consuming their products as much,
not
and then
importing it.
And then China, for example,
the highest polluter.
But I think that's actually changed recently.
It's like India now, actually.
Grant, if you could look it up, is China moving towards a renewable future?
I know you practically can't even live in the cities there.
Elon Musk just brought this up a couple weeks ago, but no, he was saying that they put so much trust in their scientists and engineering that they recognize, like, oh, wait, no. Like, the scientists told their leaders, hey, global warming is a real thing, and we're a big contributor. Then they're like, that's one of the benefits of their top-down system. Like, okay, change it now. What do we need to do?
It's like regulating the births in China when they did that based on science. Like
exactly.
The 2-child, 1-child policy,
it's something
I think.
that should never and will never fly in the United States. But
it was so smart and effective the way they did it. And you just see population rates, quality of life go, completely opposite directions that worked perfectly, basically.
Yeah. So I hope that just Americans, through like conversating and figuring out these problems, that we would do it in our way, not being told by a top-down figure, but just figuring out what's best for our nation. By the end of 2019, China's hydropower capacity reached 356 GW. China's renewable energy sector is growing faster than its fossil fuels and nuclear power capacity. China has pledged to achieve carbon neutrality before 2060 and peak emissions before 2030.
Good for them. Let's see if they actually stick to it.
Yeah, we'll see.
Or if their administration will allow it with...
But that's, I mean, at least what, like I said, Elon Musk said, is they put so much faith in their engineering and scientists that if that's what they're saying is global warming's real, we need to do something, they're like, all right, let's get it done. No time to waste.
It's very efficient.
Like you said about America being the leader, I think California is the leader in a way in our country, that whatever happens in California doesn't stay in California. So I think, I mean, this could change, obviously. I think that California pledged to be emission free by 2040.
Let's check that out, Grant.
Yeah.
I think it was electric vehicles only by 2040. They're going to
Yes,
phase.
that was it. Yeah.
Because I can't see California ever being emission free by then. At least maybe in 100 years or something.
Yeah.
But
That's up. It's controversial too. People are
Yeah.
like, wait, now I'm being told that I'm gonna only be able to buy a brand new electric vehicle.
Well, that's
At
like
any given
sooner
point.
than you think.
It
you
is,
know?
and
It's like less than
God,
20 years.
Yeah.
I love the sound of a combustion engine and like
Dude, I
a
know.
V8, the American
my
muscle.
Infinity, I
just-
love it, but I'm probably gonna have to get a Tesla. I'm just facing that as an inevitability at this
Yeah.
point. I know for a fact in 20 years I'll have 2 electric cars. I
I
might
think
have something nice petrol in the garage for like very, very seldom driving, but
exactly.
I have no
same here.
problem driving a Model X.
But
that's
gas at that point's gonna be $15 a gallon. Maybe let's
Yeah.
just assume that, and then it'll force the consumer to be like, you're
Make some
only
decisions.
driving that V8 on the weekends, maybe
I'm not
twice a month.
driving my ass anywhere in that.
Yeah, it's gonna force. Oh, that's a big one here, Grant. What do we got? California Biodiversity Initiative.org.
Carbon neutrality.
Targets to reduce carbon emissions 40% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% below 1990 levels by 2050.
100% clean energy by 2045. So
2045? We'll see.
Huh.
It's kind of interesting when we're driving out in the desert and you see all the solar panels and stuff, and
Oh,
then
and the
also you got the
windmills.
turbines and
Yeah.
whatnot.
that's awesome.
It's
It's
interesting.
completely feasible if you just get down to the technology. Like everyone wants to say, like we're limited by our technology to introduce solar power or like wind power or hydropower. You know, well that's not true. We have the ability to do it, but there's so many conglomerates of big gas that are just not gonna do. They're not gonna take it with lying down. You know, they have interests. You know, they have lobbyists that are gonna try and prevent clean energy because this is their way. It's like big tobacco, you know, but they eventually had to own up to it and stop advertising and pay fees. You know, it's going to be the same way with like coal energy, oil energy, anything that's polluting. You're going to have to put some kind of disincentive on it. You know, like it sucks. Maybe jobs are lost, but there's always collateral with decisions that are important.
There's
You know,
collateral,
that's
like,
why you
yeah.
elect really smart people to be leaders, is so that they can make the best decision that has the least amount of collateral. So 40,000 jobs on a pipeline, that is an opportunity cost for making a better earth potentially for people down the line. I think it comes down to that, you know? Opportunity costs is like the main takeaway. Is
And then-
what's going to happen tomorrow more important than what happens in 100 years? You know, that's a big question.
And then do we have faith that we're electing competent leaders
That are
going to
make our best
I think
interests.
that's one of the main issues is people have that disconnect and distrust with the government and our leaders to solve these issues.
Yeah.
But let's move on to immigration real quick. So by proximity, by virtue of being next to Mexico here in Southern California, we have a high number of Latin immigrants. And President Trump started building the border wall, and I believe, is it shut down now? Did they halt it altogether?
I don't think they did they?
Suspended it.
They suspended
so
it. Okay.
There was
Who
only
knows?
like 1,100 miles built or something, right? Or
Yeah.
like 800 miles. It wasn't even like a quarter of the border itself,
Yeah.
I think.
This is a real interesting issue because I think any nation in the year 2021 has to have policy that regulates people coming in, people going out, keeping track. It ties into terrorism and accountability and taxes with individuals and a social security number contributing towards a system that everyone's supposed to benefit from. You have groups of people that come in and kind of cause challenges within a system that is assuming everyone is paying into it, and we have borders and what have you. But on the flip side, I also weigh and measure if I was an individual in Mexico and just is looking in on America and the opportunity and the idea, and maybe you're going through really challenging times and it's rough. Life's rough, and you want to get to the other side because in your head you think that life could be better. I try to envision that and understand it. With that being said, is our system faulty to where we either we're not taking in enough people, or it's not being processed fast enough to present an opportunity like, oh yeah, you can immigrate to the United States. We have the system in place that is in place for a reason. You have to go through the system legally in order to gain access to our system. Like, that seems intuitive enough.
Yeah.
But there's that human side of us, that the idea of borders in general, there's philosophical debate of that being a very Western idea, like fencing in your home, and just the idea of borders. Like, is there something wrong with the fact that, like, oh, you're a human being, or should you be able to just cross land freely? And I don't think that's the case. I think we're far past that now, and it's just not feasible in our society. So gosh, that issue, that challenge, it's sad because we all want to have better lives.
Mm-hmm.
People immigrate. I'm proud to be part of a nation that people want to flock to better their lives and raise the next generation and hopefully contribute to our society. But I think we need a better system that processes individuals coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any opinions on the matter?
I have a lot. Well, what you were saying, the human side, I can appeal to that, the humanity side, in the way that it's just not fair that all of these people are illegally jumping the border, coming here from Mexico. It's not fair to all the other people in Bolivia, in Venezuela, what have you, who are waiting to get in legally.
I agree.
It's just not fair to them. So that appeals to my humanity. I believe in fairness. I don't know.
Well, it's very, I mean, you can compare that to waiting in the line at a grocery store or cutting the line. That's literally,
line.
We're taught that from such a young age. You do not cut.
Right.
Like, you wait your turn until it's your turn.
But do you yell at the little girl that is with that woman for cutting, right? What do you tell the little girl that's with that lady?
That's a challenge.
F you, little girl.
Little girls,
get out of here.
A lot of them are human sex traffickers. A lot of them are members of MS-13.
Oh, I don't know.
90% of the fentanyl and heroin is brought through our southern border. It's a fact.
Okay, but
sheesh.
I don't know if that goes to say that they're all bad. That's kind of a broad brush.
Of course not.
But I'm speaking on my perspective, at least. My best friend and business partner is undocumented from Chile. He came here when he was 6 years old, and I could never imagine trying to tell someone like him, he's a working professional now. Does this, he's a producer, video producer. I couldn't imagine going up to him and being like, get out of here. You're not documented. He's performing a very valuable job that is in very high demand. So I think it should be more merit-based as opposed to you're illegal, leave, I don't know about that.
It should be merit-based, and I think they're supposed to take that into account when you're entering the country legally.
Yeah.
That's part of this system in which
right.
We would love to be able to take everybody, but we can't
that's what we used to do.
Which is why...
Give me your weary, your tired masses. It says it on the Statue of Liberty,
Exactly.
But it's not feasible today to be able to do that. But just to to point out the few stragglers and try and make them out to be bad just because, a few others, I don't know if that's fair. It's at least coming from the point of view of my friend. He was brought here when he was 6 years old. How can you say you made a conscious immoral decision by breaking the law of a country you're not from because your mother brought you here when you were 6? I don't know if that's where it gets really fuzzy to me. You can get mad at MS-13 gang members for being here, but you can't make a broad type of legislature just based on a few MS-13 people and some fentanyl.
I agree. So the system should be designed to take care of an MS-13 member or someone with a record that you don't want in your country. You try to build a system that measures that, whether it's through interviews or you do your best possible job to wean out an MS-13 member.
Yeah.
But where's the humanity in a child who isn't making their own choices at that point? That could be part of the system too. Are you an adult entering or are you a child? And then if you are a child, and you've grown to learn the culture and it was just by virtue of your parents dragging you across the border and you're just tagging along,
You're not responsible for that,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah,
not
you
at
can't
6 years
assume-
old.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would never tell anyone, you need to leave because you were brought here when you were 6.
Right, but passing those laws, it will officially cover, like, it doesn't discriminate between a 6-year-old that's illegal and a 25-year-old criminal that's illegal, is my point.
Which
know?
which
Like-
laws are you referencing?
Any
You know?
laws that would be like would repeal DACA, something like that, or like just painting all illegal, undocumented, I won't say illegal, undocumented persons with a bad brush, because some are. But for the most part, if you look at it, even from like any perspective, economic, cultural, they bring more to the table than it takes away, letting more people come and be part of our society. I'm not here to say that they should just be coming over in droves, you know, but I think that there's a way that we can make it easier, because we're a melting pot. We have been, you know. I like, you know, some people might want to think that like, oh, this is like white people America, but like it's never been like that. Like we took even this area that we're sitting in right now belonged to the Spanish, you know? So this is a very interesting issue, because like this used to be, we're sitting in what was Mexico in 1820.
Mhm.
You know? This was Mexico. This was literally not part of the US.
Yeah,
so now
I
we're
agree.
going to come in and be like, well, you know what? You can't come up here now. You know, like,
Well, the idea of conquering land, people present that argument.
it's
and
very
I'm not-
arbitrary.
It's arbitrary,
It's-
but it's something that humans have been doing since the beginning of time. I mean, even
Yeah, since
Civil
we ever
wars-
settled down.
not even that, but just even people amongst their own kind and their own nations, they still fight and steal and take things from each other, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
I think we're past that point to where we have our borders defined,
Yeah,
and we're to this technological age where the base level of information is so high that you're not going to really be able to get away with things like you could maybe back in 1820,
No.
because the populace is too aware of what their government's doing,
Mhm.
or at least in comparison to that point.
Lot
I
more
mean, I'm sure there's
transparent.
still some shit we don't know, but with the facts that were presented now, we have the borders. Yes, it was land that we conquered and took from one of our neighbors.
Mhm.
You look at Europe and all these different nations, there's conquering that happens and things are taken and lines are drawn. I think that's just a fact. Sometimes it's done for a virtuous reason, sometimes not.
Mhm.
But it sounds like we're all in agreement that the 6-year-old, it could be better, but that 6-year-old who grew up here and was taken here by their parents, you can't just send them back.
Right. And like Alex said, that's where the flaws in our system come into effect. Like, you can't let the 6-year-old stay and at the same time deport all of these MS-13 members just because that's how the system is. So I think, if anything, that's what we need to fix. I don't think we should necessarily make it easier to get in here, at least not right now. Like, we're still in a pandemic and we have this economic crisis. We also have a border crisis now, whether the Biden-Harris administration wants to admit it or not. And
Can you talk more about the border crisis real quick?
sure. So when Obama was president, he said that 1,000 per day illegals coming across the border was a border crisis. We're up to 6,000, or maybe it's 4,200. Anyways, multiple times the number, either 4 times the number or 6 times the number of illegals are currently crossing. And you can't even blame them. They're being incentivized by Biden repealing the stay in Mexico policy. California, it's a sanctuary state. They're literally giving them money. This was just passed. They're literally giving the illegals money for hotel, transportation, food while they're here, the asylum seekers. And that's at the cost of taxpayers. So they're literally being incentivized. You can't even blame them for flooding over here. You can't even blame them. And the day after, January 21st, the day after Biden was inaugurated, he told ICE to halt all deportations. So ICE had to release everyone in the detention camps, 71% of which were either convicted criminals or had pending criminal charges.
Jesus.
So that it's dangerous. And you see this reflected in the counties that are closest to the border by the way that they vote. Because like take Starr County in Texas, right there at the border, it flipped to red last year. Maybe it was the year before. It flipped to red recently because these are the communities that experience the crisis firsthand. They're the first ones affected by all the drugs that they're bringing, all of the kids, sex slaves that they're bringing. They're the first ones affected by it.
So they flip red because they feel that representation is going to take care of them and
oh yeah, they
being
were
a little bit more strict.
Despite being 85 to 95% Hispanic, they flipped red. Starr County, Texas.
Wow.
They're right there at the border.
So that it sounds like an example of whether it's for politics or the image you want to portray, you start swinging the pendulum polar opposite. And okay, screw a regulatory system that weans out people that we don't want on our soil. Everyone come on over, and not only that, we're gonna give you money, taxpayer money, in taking care of you, which I'm not even necessarily directly opposed, because I'm like very, very lucky if I was able to see that some of my taxation, like some of my tax dollars are going towards a system, a program that I understand helps these individuals who were vetted through the process and now are on our I can back that. But it's the disconnect in communication and showing us, the California people, like, where's our money going? Like, where are these programs? We should have this kind of base level knowledge, on how it works. And it's complicated, but I think it could be communicated. I think it could be done. And just letting people flood over. I understand it. I have a heart that can grasp the idea of wanting a better life. But the fact is, through pure chance, where you're born, you could have been born in a hut in frickin' Africa. You don't know. You just end up here, or at least we did, to my knowledge, and that's just it. And it's sad, but there's got to be a system that weans out. Everyone can't just have a free ticket, Well,
especially in California, where, like I said, they're shelling out millions of taxpayer dollars to support these people while they're seeking asylum. California is having a homeless crisis. Like, what about all those people? The wealth gap in California has exploded since Newsom took office, hence his pretty bipartisan recall effort. Like, it's just a bad situation here.
Yeah.
So that on top of it is worsening it, in my opinion. I think we have our own problems that need to be addressed before we can support these people with millions of taxpayer dollars.
That's an interesting concept that I can get behind. When we have all this funding that oftentimes we're not spending on our soil to fix our problems, we kind of spread it out and go try to fix other people's problems, which if I was someone that was briefed, let's say, in a very serious, tragic issue, I imagine any of us, in another country on the other end of the world, and you have this funding, or if you want to help, we're good people. I think we're still going to want to try to help those people on the other end of the world. I know I would. Like, if I was briefed and I'm like, shit, like, I have the power, like, I have this money and these resources. God, do I want to use all of this to solve the homeless crisis here, or am I using it elsewhere? These are all just different things that our leaders are supposed to be combating and solving, and it's rough because that homeless issue too, it's really challenging. There's been different, more socialistic programs of taking care of them that end up turning these giant apartment-like homes into big drug houses. Is that because there was, like, you provided the infrastructure, but you didn't provide the mental like capacity or programs to help become them more functioning? Or I brought this up on the last or two podcasts ago with God, I'm trying to blank on his name. Grant, you remember his name? Joseph Valdez, who he was addicted to heroin for like 40 years, like 38 years.
Wow.
and he just graduated from Cal State Long Beach with honors, like turned
Wow.
his life around and
I
just
saw him in the paper.
yeah, he was on 2
That's
episodes
cool.
ago.
Wow.
But we brought up the idea of damaged goods, which is I brought up with the homeless issue is, can you even help some of these individuals? We closed down insane asylums,
Yeah.
and or are they just damaged goods that literally you can't fix or help no matter what you do?
That's the
I
big
think
thing.
there's some
Yeah.
maybe so, some that just need a helping hand to get back on their feet. But yeah, the immigration issue, it is challenging.
It's a nuanced issue for sure, but it's, it just comes down to like, we're America. I think that we will always benefit from multiculturalism over isolationism. And, there's historical precedents for this, like Theodore Roosevelt, when he issued, isolationist policy, the economy saw a direct decline from that until World War I came and renewed the economy. So I think it's always good, even no matter what kind of group you're in, to have different perspectives. And it comes down to that with a country, you're going to have a lot more viewpoints, a lot more different types of businesses and industries, and a lot more potential for social and industrial growth when you have people from different places and different mindsets. You can't just expect, like, we're Americans, we're gung-ho with our American flag, everyone stay out, when it's like, we were fundamentally, from a most basic standpoint, built as a place of immigrants.
Yeah, land of immigrants.
When do we cut that off?
Yeah.
270 years down the line, no more.
And I agree.
So-
I want to bring this into the point of like the idea of America, because this is something that I feel has been at stake the past year or two, is just people not truly believing in the idea of America. They're losing hope in it. I mean, when the BLM protests were happening, there was one that went right here by South Street. Like, we literally had to get the front of our place here boarded up, and all the neighbors too. But I remember seeing a sign that said "Fuck America." There was people walking with signs saying "Fuck America" right outside on the soil, which, by virtue of being on American soil, you're able to hold up that sign and not have the police fire at you or get thrown in prison. So it's a little contradictory there, but nonetheless, that is out in the sphere. It looked like a young Hispanic man was holding this sign that said "Fuck America." So in tying it to what you said, I love and believe in the idea of America being this land of immigrants and diversity, and we're so far advanced, and we've come so far by virtue of having so many different types of people. I mean, even when we grow up in elementary school and in high school, we see different slangs, different hues of color of people. Like, I think that is beautiful, especially in Orange County. It's, arguably pretty conservative and white, but it's diverse too. And I think the idea of America needs to be, it needs to be on the forefront again, and something that we can all believe in. And it's not a matter of waving the flag, which was starting to get, it coincided with like the Trump flag is what I felt over the last year. If you were someone that was waving the American flag, you were almost like a racist Trump supporter. Because if you were for Biden, or if you were liberal, or if you stood for social justice, you wouldn't be about the American flag. That, in my opinion, is so dangerous.
Yeah,
and it's something I'll never stand for, because what I think is going to bring our country together is we have to have a baseline of nationalism and the belief in like America and our flag. With that being said, people throw out like, but we're imperfect. We were built on slavery. We have all of these faults in the past. There might be some truth to that, but it's in the past.
Yeah.
And our system, our Constitution, I really believe in it being put in place to allow us to have these conversations and to vote new people into office and to have disagreements and come out on the other side. But if we lose like sight in the idea of that flag is what unites us all, and the idea of America that's like a beautiful thing that could bring us together. I want people left or right, green, blue, black, whatever. I want everyone to be able to believe in that. But the fact of the matter is some people don't. They feel like the flag doesn't represent them.
Yeah.
I'm not the right color on this soil. Life's unfair. I wasn't born into this family. I just want to get your guys' closing thoughts before we wrap this up on like the idea of America, left and right, because people are conservative on the right tend to be more loving of the flag and America first and these different ideals that I think should be in place. There's a healthy sense of nationalism, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Just to kind of wrap up on that and the direction we're going. I think that it's a shame that one person and their campaign could, give such a negative connotation to waving a flag around, because like I think I use my parents as a perfect example. They proudly have the flag out in front of their house, but then there's also a Black Lives Matter poster right in the lawn too. I think there's a happy medium you can find, and for us as Americans, regardless of what the issue is, we are humans, and humans, evolutionarily speaking, we move forward, we adapt, we're doing better things with ourselves. And I think it's hard to make the argument that we've ever regressed, really, at least in the very recent history. We've been on a pretty steady, uptick as far as development, overall the entire world. And with the U.S. being at the forefront of that, it's up to us to, spearhead that change and see old archaic belief systems go the way that they have always gone, which is, it dies off. You're going to have people dying off, and this certain mindset is going to take over, whether people that are dying off and are stuck in the old mindset like it or not. You have youth, and the youth are going to determine the direction that we go. So they're seeing people like Trump, and I think that if anything makes it even more to the point where younger people are going to be like, why would I identify with something like that? And I think it worked for him for what he did. It got him his support, but I think it serves as an absolute detriment to our democracy, and it undermines the Republicans completely. And I think it's going to be a turning point for our society going forward. Is like,
do you think we maybe needed to see someone as polarizing as Trump to kind of open our eyes to maybe realize that that's not maybe what's best in uniting the country? And maybe Biden is not either.
I'm not
but
to say he is either.
I
think it's a learning experience is all I can say. It's not something that I could really say has benefited us, but learning from it will benefit from us, or it will benefit us, I should say. And we just need to go forward. It's so many beliefs just target others, when I at least am of the ilk that you're a person, you should at least do what you want to do as long as it's not inversely affecting others, and at least try and uphold some level of altruism and empathy when you're dealing with groups that you need to recognize don't have it the same as you. And that's always going to be the case. We are America, the richest nation in the entire world. It's up to us to recognize the shortfallings of others, We can't pick and choose is what I'm trying to say.
Got it. And you do you say that not with the goal of like an equality of outcome? Because the equality of outcome is sometimes scary it's like a socialistic argument of nothing's fair. People start at different levels. The goal isn't to make everyone get to the same point.
No, but
it's just to recognize that there are some people that are so down and out systemically that us, as if we care about our fellow Americans, then we should build systems that just help make less losers. I think if you build everyone up, then it raises GDP. It's good for everybody.
Yeah. It's development of a developed world.
Yeah.
Of a developed country. We're a developed country, and unless we're going to be undeveloped, then progressive policies is really the only like feasible future I can see where it would at least like reflect the overall standpoint of, I'm not to say like liberal policies, but progressive, like it's in the word progress. You want to have progress, but to conserve old base ideologies is just, it's always been dangerous. You know, I can't, like, if you think of the Inquisition or things like that, like when can you point in history where a government has been like, we need to keep these beliefs? And how is that ever, when is that ever actually gone on to behoove that society? Is when governments tell you what to believe and like, no, the old ways work better. Like, if the old ways worked better, then the old ways would never have changed and we wouldn't be where we are today. So things like racism, you know, immigration policies, things like that, xenophobia, it's not going to be here. It doesn't belong in a world anymore. And I can't see it being a thing in 50 years. At least based on the current generation, it's going to wean out the bigots. It's going to wean out the ones that are closed-minded.
I hope so, because I think we're all in agreement that like racism like sucks. No one wants to be judged because of their skin color.
All of us are not racist.
Mhm.
Exactly. But Jaymie, do you have any like closing thoughts on where we're heading, the idea of America? Like, do you have hope in our future?
As far as progressivism, like you were saying, I felt like it was a healthy dose of progressivism. And recently it's like spiraling out of control to where, like you said, people are in the streets with "Fuck America" signs. I don't know if you heard about, what was his name? Ex-NFL player last year during all the BLM protests. He offered to fly people out who hate America, offered to fly them to other countries that don't have freedom just to see what it's like. Like, we have it so good here, and this whole everything is racist now. There is not one law that discriminates against race in this country. If I'm black, I can do anything a white person can do. I may not start at the same point, but that's relative to everyone. None of us start at the exact same point. None of us end up at the exact same point. Like you said, equality of outcome. Even people who start at very similar points can have completely different outcomes, and it comes down to personal responsibility and making good choices for your life. And I think that's reflected, I mean, in the whole conservative belief system. But I have a little story, just a little anecdote. My boyfriend's best friend, who is a cop, a veteran, and now a cop, and a SWAT officer, he does very well, good guy. So obviously he ended up great. Under the same roof, his sister was raised. His sister's like 5 years younger than him. She ended up in prison for 7 years for accessory to first-degree murder. And it just shows, like, you could start at literally the same place and end up completely different outcomes in life. There is no such thing as complete equality. And I feel like that is what progressivism is chasing for whatever reason. So
God forbid we're all equal, right?
But there's no such thing.
Okay, so I think equality in certain...
It's a good thing to aim for.
Well, in certain regards to where, like, someone shouldn't get further ahead or behind based on your skin color. I think that's like very...
Exactly.
See, so you agree in that. It's not like we're not trying to get equality of outcome. Like, everyone needs to have a salary of $100,000. Otherwise, it's unfair. So we're going to build a system that creates this. No, it's... I think what Alex was saying more of is just... It's less about judging someone based on the color of their skin. And then I totally agree, Jaymie, that I weigh individual decision-making greatly. I hold people accountable and 100% think that there's certain patterns of decision that get you ahead or behind, especially in our society. But then, just from my anecdotes too, I've literally sat in the same room as certain individuals that have like made racist remarks, which in the course of someone's life, if you hold that ideology, like, you are going to have an effect and impact on your community and the world at large, like in your daily decision making that might discriminate or change the outcome of someone else's life just based on their skin color. And the thing that's always stuck with me too is, my last name's Brown. I remember at a very, very young age and I can't remember exactly who told it to me, or even if I did, I probably wouldn't disclose. But with the last name Brown, I remember being told that you need to be careful who like you name your child, the first name, because on like resumes, and this is another anecdote which I've heard people tossing out resumes who have, let's say, an African American name.
Yeah.
So with the last name Brown being common in the African American community, and if you take it back history wise, it's because they assumed the last name of their slave owners, Brown. So that always stuck out. I was like, whoa, that's a direct systemic impact of like hiring if someone's making a judgment based on your name. So with that being said, I totally think that is decreasing, and it has been rapidly since like the Martin Luther King days. We are heading in the right direction. But nonetheless, there's got to be trickle-down effects still within our society. I've experienced it just with what's come out of people's mouths in my social network. And whether I combat them at that moment or I kind of just take note of it and like, okay, there's still fucking assholes like you out there that are literally like super racist and have an impact. But with that being said, I think weighing individual decisions and building programs in communities where people are more impoverished and don't have the same support system, it's like, okay, let's make less losers. How do we build everyone up?
Right. And that's something that needs to be dealt with in the system. Like, I can't even say enough times how imperfect the system is. It needs a lot of work. Not sure how to go about that because I'm not a politician. But like you said, with the trickle-down effects of systemic racism, I feel like in the name of progressivism, we're almost overcorrecting the problem with policies like affirmative action, because at least where I work, we have to hire certain people based on their skin color. And it's good and it's bad. I kind of see it as discrimination, like based on skin color. Like, I don't know, hiring based on name, like you said, or skin color just feels wrong to me. And these are the kinds of things that I see firsthand at work. Like, this could be a completely better candidate, way better suited for the job that we need done, but we have to hire this person because they're Asian or whatever. So in the name of progressivism, I think we're almost overcorrecting the problem, where like all the other people who are more qualified or what have you, have better resumes, are almost like, dude, this is discrimination based on my skin color. Like, even though I'm white, you're taking my skin color into consideration when hiring. Like, I just don't feel good about that.
That comes back to opportunity costs. You know, like, you're going to have groups like us, white people, who feel bad. Like, oh man, that Rodriguez got into UCLA with a lower GPA than me. Like, I could never see myself being upset about something like that, because he comes from a community of way more significantly oppressed people. So it's our responsibility to do what we can to upraise those people.
That's
because
why
they
school
can't.
Choice is important.
Yeah, well, okay, but when you're in a historically oppressed community like in the South that have been black for 400 years or 200 years, and they literally have no opportunity for upward mobility, they don't really have a choice of school. So it comes back to the opportunity costs thing. We need to make sacrifices if we want other people to have a better quality of life. And in essence, it's going to have an effect on us, and we all have a better quality of life. So yes, I think if there's a few less Asian kids going to UCLA because they have a higher grade point cutoff or SAT cutoff than a black kid or a brown kid, but that leads to, you know, as opposed to 1.2% of black people being college graduates, it leads to 3%. You know, but it takes away 0.04% from Asian college graduate rate. I think that's a pretty realistic opportunity cost.
Could we all agree that the most ideal future in society would be making judgments based on competence and not skin color? Do you think that's the end goal?
In the end goal, yes. But while we still have places where people come from where there literally is only poor Latinos in a community, you know? you can't go up to them and be like, well, you just didn't try hard enough. That's why you're not successful. Like, this kid could be a physicist, but he's never gonna know. Like, he's in the shitty inner city school.
To pull him up by your bootstraps.
And he has ADHD that's undiagnosed, or he has, high functioning autism that's undiagnosed because they have shitty hospitals in the area. How can you even begin to say that that's the same as me growing up in a suburban area, having access to education? No, saying, oh, well, you just didn't try hard enough, little boy. Like, no, that's kind of asinine.
Yeah.
That's socioeconomic privilege. Like, right, it's not based on skin color. It's not white privilege. It's socioeconomic privilege.
Right, but they didn't choose to be in the community that they were placed in, because there's black communities in the South that have been black communities since they were kicked off their plantations during Reconstruction, and they've been poor for 200 years. And there's not industries going into there. There's not like a GM plant that's going into this, 2,000 population black community in Alabama. So they already do not have the same opportunity as me.
Right.
So they
but
need
it's
to
not
be
because
upraised.
of your skin color.
No,
but it's because
their
socioeconomic status, where they grew up, the
which
schools
is
that
more
they
often
went to,
black people.
Which is more often instituted by democratic policies.
But
those are democratic
back to what I
environments.
said about they've been poor communities for 200 years. So they obviously can't just decide not to be a poor community anymore.
I think if you take it back, what you're trying to get at is measuring cause and effect. So what was the first causal point that triggered a certain community with mindset that's impoverished? What was the true cause?
It was Reconstruction.
You would say Reconstruction.
And the absolute botching of civil rights.
Even if now, Jaymie, it is a socioeconomic issue, are you able to pinpoint maybe the first causal effect that created that community, which has those problems of gangs and
you can't say it's because they're black, because
I would never say that.
Oh, no. I'm just saying, not you, but someone, I hear that argument a lot, is something to do with cultural differences, but that can't be it either. It's the fact that they are already in that area. They were placed in that position. So they're going to face more and more problems along down the line historically. It's as much our responsibility to help them as it is to help a homeless person, because they found themselves in this circumstance, be it through their own choices or, planning and their own parents putting them in that position. It's not for me to say. But it's for me to make a sacrifice and say, you know what, I'll take the hit if it comes to the bottom. The bottom line is it's actually benefiting someone who can't, raise themselves up by their own bootstraps because of circumstances.
I'd rather get to the root of the problem, which is policies. And all of these, liberal shitholes that we have in America are run by Democrats and Democrat policies.
That's because populated areas are run by Democrats. So you have a higher quality of living in the Republican counties, but that's because there's 3,000 people in the county. When you get into inner city areas, logic dictates there's going to be a lot higher level of Democratic policy because there's more people. Republican policies don't apply to mass people. It works in a really small area, but if you're trying to account for so many people, it's just not feasible to work off of a Republican mandated policy.
It works in Florida. It works in Texas. I'm just saying I see a pattern of all of these systemic issues being run in Democrat cities. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think there's one city or county or state even in America that has these issues and is run by a Republican. The rest, all Democrat. It's a matter of policy. There are systemic issues, but they need to be fixed with policies.
What policies is it that Democrats institute that would actually be detrimental to a poor family though? They want to have more welfare, obviously, that would help a poor family. But what is it that you think that makes you say these New York is run by Democrats and it's a poor liberal shithole or whatever.
I didn't say poor. I said liberal
LA
shithole,
is a liberal shithole, but these cities tend to have some of the highest production rates and surpluses of any city, and the cities that are in crippling debt are the ones run by Republicans. So it comes back to the point of it's not about Democrats making policies; it's about more people being in one area, which leads to more of a diaspora of of liberal related issues like poorness or having kids out of wedlock, that's going to happen in cities where there's more people. That's just the nature. It's not, there's a Democratic mayor, so it's a shithole now. Like, no, there's 3 million people in like a 50 square mile radius. Like, that's going to lead to big issues.
That's definitely part of it. The whole metropolitan aspect, like, it sucks. I mean, just look at California. We're one of the most densely populated.
San Fran's pretty nice right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Stop. But anyways, yeah, there's an
Needles
example.
And shit on the street.
Newsom, I wouldn't say it was under control before Newsom took office, but it was a freaking lot better before he took office. But that just being one example, taking it back in history, Lyndon B. Johnson, he was a Democrat, right?
Shit, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, the party lines are very skewed pre like 1950 because
I know.
Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, but that doesn't mean anything because the party switched in 1910 or something.
Well, anyways, I'll just talk about his policy, which would be very Democratic today, which was the Great Society Act in the 1960s. He literally incentivized, so he went into all these black communities, and this was when the single motherhood rate in black communities was 12%. It was very low. And he basically incentivized all of these women to not marry the father of their children by offering single mothers in black communities money.
I don't know if that, you might have a causation issue there because I don't know if that was what
caused
caused
that. It was the Great
that.
Society Act. It's welfare. It's like an over stimulus, if you will, of welfare, and it literally incentivized these poor black women to not marry.
I don't think so.
They would make more money
we
by
can all
not
agree.
marrying the father of their
That's
child.
like saying welfare incentivizes being poor.
Welfare incentivizes people not getting off their ass and not getting jobs.
I think that
I
has
think we'll
some
agree
truth
to
it.
disagree in that. But
I do agree with you there. But it's what you were presenting before. It sounds like we would all agree that's not a good policy in solving the issue.
Anyways, that
it
was a
bad
very Democratic policy. And today we see the trickle down effects of that. The single motherhood rate in the black community is 75%. It just kept rising since the 1960s. It was totally fine. It was lower when slavery was put in place, the single black motherhood rate. And because of, and I don't even want to say it was just that one policy, the Great Society Act in the 1960s, but I mean, it shows like from when that policy was implemented, steady decline in fathers staying in the home.
I don't think that could be drawn, that could be said like that's the causation though, because that's just one thing. Like there's such a broad amount of things that would lead to some kind of such a substantial pattern in a society that you couldn't just be like this one policy by this one president has led to this. Like
of course, that's why I said
There's so many
it's
variables.
not that one policy likely, but I don't think it's a coincidence.
But it might be very. I don't know if it has that as big of an impact on it as you may think.
I think
though.
it does.
Well,
So to bring it full circle, the idea of America and where we're going in the future, we can all agree that the main goal is to get to a point of judging people, whether it's for hiring or what have you, based on competence and not based on skin color. And there's systemic issues, I think, that we've all acknowledged, right? That exist, and then it's a matter of how do we solve the problem to get to that ultimate goal where we are united by one flag, one nation, we're all on the same soil. We embrace and love the fact that there's people from all walks of life and have come from all over the earth to settle on our soil, recognizing that we haven't been perfect. There's pitfalls of the past, but I have faith in the information and like tech age to where we're heading in the right direction. And
I don't know about the technology. There's a lot of censorship now.
Oh, for sure. But I think
it's very concerning that the big tech companies are more powerful than the president of the United States.
It is, and their leadership leaning very far left.
mm-hmm.
Because that's not balanced, and that's like what I said earlier. I truly think when judges, I mean, which the Supreme Court judges right now, think of it, their perspective, it can't be fully grasping the idea and the implementation of like social media platforms and this technology, just because by virtue of timing, like you didn't live through it in your high school years into your 20s and 30s and so forth. I think we're going to get to a point where it's going to be treated like water and electricity, and that there's going to be problems either way you cut it, but we're going to get to that point where you're not going to be able to regulate it because it's going to be like water. Everyone has access to it unless you are inciting violence or like a direct threat and those different elements there, which could cause you to either like get canceled or arrested. I think we're moving to that direction, but we're just going through growing pains right now. It's
coming
Growing
off of a rough
pains.
time, very divisive time. I think it's going to be a little while before we even get to like the pre-2016, 2015 type of America, you know? But yeah,
I think we're going to be all right.
we'll bounce
I
back.
think we're going to be all right.
I think
What
so.
do you guys think?
Eventually.
I like to stay optimistic.
Yeah, same. Optimistic, but not naive. It's just,
Yeah, realistic.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, all right, you guys, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks
I think
for
I
having
Thank you,
us.
Zach.
I enjoyed the conversation, and I'll have you guys on one day soon.
You're awesome,
one day in
man.
the future.
Anytime.
I'll have to catch up.
Sweet.
But all right, with that being said, talking goes a long way, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thank you.
Awesome.